This is the story of how a UNIP activist became Zambia's most wanted rebel, Adamson Branson Musanda Mushala. Adamson Branson Musanda Mushala was born in 1935 in northern Rhodesia, now Zambia. He came from Mufumbo district in northwestern province. Before engaging in open rebellion, Adamson Mushala was originally a member of the United National Independence Party UNIP, led by Kenneth David Kaunda, where he participated in the fight against colonial rule. He was a Zambian insurgent who led a resistance movement against the one-party government of President Kenneth David Kaunda from 1975 until his death in 1982, when he was killed by officers of the Zambia Army. His wife, Rejoice Mushala, recalled that both were active in the struggle. She was present in 1961 when women protested topless in Lusaka against colonial rule. In 1962, Mushala was dispatched to China for guerrilla warfare training, anticipating a return to combat the colonial government of Zambia. However, Zambia had already achieved independence by the time he returned. Zambia gained independence peacefully on 24th October 1964. There was no war to fight. While there, he had met Chairman Mao Zedong. Mushala returned home as a trained revolutionary. He worked at UNIP's headquarters, Freedom House, processing applications for Zambians sent overseas for training. He aspired to be appointed as the minister under the UNIP government, a request that President Kenneth Kaunda denied. Feeling frustrated and marginalized, Mushala left Zambia with a group of followers for Southwest Africa, now Namibia, which was then under South African control, to further his guerrilla skills. Mushala grew disillusioned. In 1966, he joined the opposition United Party, UP. After violent clashes, the United Party was banned in 1968 and Mushala was detained. By December 1972, Zambia had become a one-party state. In December 1972, Mushala told his wife they were going to a wedding in Mongo. Instead, they crossed into Angola. The family settled in Rwanda, then moved to South Africa. Mushala returned to Zambia in 1975 and initiated a rebellion against the UNIP-led government, a campaign that continued until his death in 1982. It was the beginning of his break with Kaunda. He went back to the forests of northwestern province and began a guerrilla campaign against the Kaunda government. He formed the Democratic Supreme Council DSC. Later it became the Democratic Revolution Movement DEREMO. His base was in the dense forests of Lumumba Nshika, north of Kafue National Park. Mushala's grievances were political and regional. He opposed the one-party system. He was angry at what he saw as the marginalization of northwestern province. He wanted political power. He also capitalized on local ethnic affiliations, following the footsteps of chiefs who had rejected UNIP's national project. His group grew to between 150 and 500 men. Some were armed, many were not. From 1976, reports of attacks began to reach Lusaka. Mushala's men burned villages near Matushi and Mufumbo. They clashed with the army. They broke into schools in Kasempa district. They abducted people, including Alexander Saimwende, who later became Mushala's second in command. Agriculture collapsed as people were too afraid to go to their fields. Families were broken apart by kidnappings and abductions. Hunger and starvation emerged. Mushala's movement was notorious for brutal tactics, abducting women, executing suspected informers, and using black magic. He issued propaganda against the one-party state as early as February 1976. In September 1976, he denied receiving external support, but said that under his rule, Zambia would adopt an anti-communist stance and open relations with South Africa and Rhodesia. He told Chief Kalongesha that he wanted to contest the presidency against Kaunda in competitive elections. His plan of action proposed a federal multi-party democracy called the United States of Zambia. Power would be diffused among chiefs and regions, but the state saw him differently. UNIP called him a bandit. On 28 January 1976, President Kaunda extended the state of emergency regulations to cover Northwestern Province. Troops were mobilized to deal with the insurgency. The government adopted a two-pronged strategy with the cooperation of locals and used coercive measures to suppress the rebellion. But coercion backfired. Violence against civilians suspected of helping Mushala alienated the population. People were unwilling to give intelligence. For years, Mushala evaded capture. Some said it was tactics, others said it was witchcraft. Unconfirmed reports claimed that government even hired witch doctors to stop him. On the ground, the army struggled. Mushala knew the terrain and the people. His reputation for trickery and magical disappearances grew. He was reputed to have survived numerous attempts to capture or kill him, a feat attributed by some to witchcraft and supernatural abilities. Unconfirmed reports suggested that the Zambian government even enlisted the help of witch doctors, both locally and internationally, in unsuccessful attempts to capture him. Lack of outside support kept Mushala's group small and poorly armed. By 1977, some of Mushala's original group had been captured or killed, including his brother and medicine man, Yotam Chimwanga. The rebellion never made substantial military gains, but it stabilized the province and created an atmosphere of fear. Adamson Mushala was killed in a military ambush on November 27. The incident took place near his camp in the West Lunga National Park in Northwestern Province, close to Solwezi, the very area his rebellion had taken its roots following a post-independence dispute in the 1960s. He was killed by a bullet that struck him through his eye. He was 47 years old at the time of his death. The state wanted proof. In a final display intended to confirm his death to the public, Mushala's body was paraded at Solwezi General Hospital for public viewing. State television showed close-ups of his cadaver. He was buried in an unmarked grave at Kimasala Cemetery. His death marked the effective end of the armed insurgency. His wife Rejoice heard the news on radio. She was under house arrest. She was denied permission to attend his burial for security reasons. Following Mushala's death, leadership of the rebel movement was assumed by his second-in-command, Alexander Saimwende, who was then a member of the Central Committee for Northwestern Province. Most of his supporters returned to their villages. Saimwende decided to cease hostilities. He was flown to Lusaka and subsequently received a presidential pardon from Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, marking the formal end to a long-standing resistance movement. The rebellion had devastating social effects: displacement, destroyed schools and clinics, disrupted agriculture. Mushala's rebellion was part of wider opposition to the one-party state. In 1991, Zambia returned to multi-party democracy.
There is nothing that stops me from creating in Zambia a one-party state, apart from the principles I have stated so many times, that we do want to bring about or to achieve conversion before baptism. In other words, we must convince the people of the goodness of what we're trying to do in the country. And once we get the majority of them, I would myself be quite satisfied to introduce the one-party state.
Despite Adamson Mushala being killed in his fight for multi-party democracy, his firstborn son, Bet Mushala, born on January 16, 1960, lived up to his father's spirit and was elected Member of Parliament for Mufumbwe as an independent in 1996. In 2000, he rejoined the Movement for Multi-Party Democracy (MMD), resulting in a by-election and won the seat on the MMD ticket. In February 2001, Bet Mushala asked the government to honor his father, Adamson Mushala, for championing multi-party democracy, but this never happened, probably because of the method his father had used in his fight for multi-party democracy. In 2001 December general elections, under the leadership of President Levi Patrick Mwanawasa, Bet Mushala stood on MMD ticket and won the Mufumbwe parliamentary seat for the third time. In 2002, President Mwanawasa appointed him as provincial minister for Northwestern Province. Later in 2012, President Michael Sata of the Patriotic Front appointed him as the Northwestern Province permanent secretary. Adamson Mushala remains a polarizing figure in Zambia's history, an individual who strongly divided people's opinions, feelings or support. That is referring to two sides of debate over superhero and villain in a comic book. To some, he was a violent rebel leader responsible for burning villages and abducting civilians. To others, he was a symbol of resistance against political oppression. In 2018, his name appeared alongside Robert Mugabe and Muammar Gaddafi in a calendar celebrating Africa's heroes. Even today, his grave remains overgrown and largely forgotten, but his family has expressed plans to build a mausoleum in his honor. Adamson Musiala did not win his war. He did not topple Kaunda. But for 7 years, he forced Zambia to confront a question it was not ready to answer. What happens when the promise of independence fails to reach the margins? He was a product of the independence struggle, and he became its fiercest critic. Whether villain or hero, Musiala's story is part of Zambia's story. A story of hope, betrayal, and the cost of dissent.